Before I start my prepared remarks, though, I just wanted to say a couple of things about what's been going on in the news in the last week or two. I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this, but particularly when I saw the composition of the audience, I said, I really need to say what's on my mind regarding this topic. I have a 17-year-old daughter. She's going to be graduating high school this year. And when she was about 8 or 9 years old, she realized that her daddy had more than a passing interest in politics, so she started asking me questions. And she learned about that there's two main parties in the United States. She learned that I'm a Democrat. So she asked me, why, Daddy, are you a Democrat? And I was thinking about that a lot over the last 2 weeks. And if you've been watching what's been going on, I think you could probably figure out why. People ask me all the time, what's it feel like to go on a place like Fox News and defend the Democratic point of view, defend liberalism, things like that. And I always smile when people ask that question. I talk about other things. I never address it directly. I'm going to address it here directly for the first time. For me, I think it's always been pretty easy for the simple fact that I'm 100% sure that me and the party that I support is right. And there have been a couple of dozen moments in my life where things have happened that just completely reinforce that point of view. When a young lady was denied the opportunity to speak before the United States House of Representatives regarding an issue of health care and birth control for women, that was one of those times. But then it got better. We had the most popular radio show host in the United States stand up and call women, and I say women, not just this one woman, because this is an issue for all women. He called women the S word and prostitutes and every other thing you can imagine for simply wanting access to health care. And I thought at that moment, thank God, I'm going to say God because we're in a church, thank God I am a Democrat. So I just wanted to share that with you all before I got started. But it is, I have to say, it is a great time to be a supporter of this president.
Bring it down. Pull down.
Technical difficulty. It's a great time to be a supporter of this president. As you can see, his presumptive Republican opponent, Mitt Romney, has a 48% unfavorable rating and only a 32% favorable. It took George W. Bush 8 years of bad policies to get favorability ratings this low. This guy did it in a few months of campaign. Every time Romney gives a speech or appears on TV, his numbers go down. It's a great time to be a Democrat. But we have had, let's see if this works for me this time. Now it's down. Which one? How many IT guys does it take to?
I'll tell you, it takes one and one.
We have had an interesting first term for President Obama. The history of the last 3 years is what I call a tale of two narratives. And those narratives lead directly to why I think it is so important that we return Barack Obama to the White House for a second term. Now, the first narrative is of a country in danger of sinking into complete financial ruin and chaos. Now, there's no doubt that what we did experience from 2008 to 2010 was pretty bad, right? But what could have been was almost unimaginable. Into that dire circumstance stepped the country's first black president, bolstered by a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House of Representatives. They enacted a stimulus, They saved the U.S. auto industry. They restored confidence in our financial system. And they began the process of putting millions of Americans back to work. That's one narrative. The second narrative is of a defeated party that had a choice to make. At the end of 2008, the Republican Party was about as low as one of the two major parties has been in the last 100 years. It's hard to remember, but that is how bad it was. They were at about 20% approval rating in this country. Now, they could have chosen, at that point, a path similar to what the British Labour Party chose in the early 1980s. They had experienced a string of defeats, and they had lost their way. They had lost their way, they had lost touch with voters, and they decided to moderate and move towards the center to become more competitive. And that ultimately led to Tony Blair and the new Labour Party in the UK. When some Republicans in early 2009 suggested it might be time to have a listening tour, and they wanted to discuss moving to the center, let's see what happened.
Long story short, we found a way to do just that. Listening to people can make a difference.
So I'm actually optimistic if we have the humility to start by listening and learning.
And listen to the people.
That's what we really mean when we say we're going to be out there listening to the people.
That's what we're talking about here. We're listening to people, putting together our own thoughts.
That's what these forums are going to be about listening to a series of town hall forums so that we can get back to listening to the people.
We do not need a listening tour. We need a teaching tour. That is what the Republican Party / the conservative movement needs to focus on. Listening tour ain't it.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Here with us now, Republican representative from Virginia and House Minority Whip, Congressman Eric Cantor joins us.
He's on a listening tour.
He's on a listening tour.
Let's start with Rush Limbaugh, who seems to be mocking the idea of a listening tour. What do you say to Rush?
No, Joe, really, this is not a listening tour.
Okay. So we had Romney, we had Jeb Bush, we had Eric Cantor in the beginning saying, yes, we're on a listening tour, we're going to listen to people. And what they were really talking about was moderating their party, moving toward the center. And Rush slapped them down. So since that time, and reinforced in the last couple of weeks in a really despicable way, it's been clear that Rush Limbaugh controls the message and the direction of the Republican Party. Instead of moderating under Limbaugh's direction, Republicans doubled down on a radical right-wing agenda. And that's what we've seen in the last 3 years. Now, at a normal time in American history, the knowledge of who controls the Republican Party, or the Democratic Party really, might have been something interesting only to academics, historians, and maybe political scientists. But remember, this was no ordinary time in American history. The country was in crisis. And at Limbaugh's suggestion and behest, Republicans refused to work with the Democrats to fix this country's problems. For the first time since the Civil War, because of these divisive far-right Republicans, the country did not come together at a time of major national crisis. The Republicans fought and obstructed the president when he implemented a stimulus to stop the bleeding in the country. They fought the president when he went about saving the U.S. auto industry and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that depended on it. They fought the president when he tried to implement middle-class tax cuts. They fought the president when he tried to raise the debt ceiling. So the saving of the economy, the bringing it back from the brink of disaster, was accomplished by Democrats and President Obama while having to fight off the Republicans at every turn and on every issue. The Republican Party that has emerged from the ashes of the 2008 election defeat is a party that we can never allow to control both the legislative and executive branches of the government. It's a party that's hostile to women, it's a party to our children, and to the economy. But let me make one thing clear. The reasons to re-elect President Obama aren't merely about how bad the Republicans are. They're bad. But that's not the only reason. President Obama has a string of accomplishments rivaling any president in their first term. The president passed the hate crimes bill. He invested in clean energy. He got Osama bin Laden, which is something that George W. Bush couldn't do in 7 years. He ended the Iraq War. He repealed the discriminatory don't ask, don't tell policy in the armed forces. The president created a consumer financial protection agency that, among other things, now regulates derivatives in this country for the first time. He, of course, passed landmark health care reform, several major provisions of which are right now in effect, including that young adults can stay on their parents' policies through age 25. And that health insurance companies must spend 85% of their income on actual health care for their policyholders. What a concept. Or they have to rebate the difference. And finally, after an economic downturn where 8 million jobs were lost, the president has created 3 million jobs during his time in office. This is a president who keeps his promises to the American people. Against this amazing level of achievement, this is yet another reason why I'm so excited about this election. Against this amazing level of achievement, we have Republican presidential hopefuls offering the same tax cuts for the rich, the same attacks on women's rights and equality. In short, the same failed policies that caused the crisis out of which we are all still digging ourselves. So I think the two narratives that I've presented to you are a clear choice to the electorate between President Obama and the eventual Republican nominee. Do we want someone with a clear record of accomplishment, or do we want to pick one of a group of men whose primary contribution over the last 3 years has been obstruction? Do we want a president who stands for equality for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered community, for minorities, for women? Or do we want to elect someone who advocates for discrimination and gender bias? Do we want a president who wants to provide opportunities to all? Or do we want to help someone who wants to help the most vulnerable? Or do we want someone whose goal is to funnel larger and larger amounts of money and power to those already wealthy and who already wield more than their fair share of influence? The choice is clear. We must re-elect President Obama in 2012. So please join me, join Harlem for Obama's efforts, join the campaign, and let's get it done this November. Thank you very much.